are an Ironman!
Welcome to episode 58. Today I'm joined by Stevie McKenna. Stevie, thank you very much for agreeing to come back onto the podcast.
No worries, Megan. Good to be here. Thanks.
Stevie, we first met you whenever we did the Oma Triathlon Club special with the reflections on Ironman Copenhagen. And it was a great crack linking in with all you guys. We've all listened to that. And I'm intrigued to find out a wee bit more about the journey that took you to the red carpet in Copenhagen. I want to try and firstly take you way back, Stevie, if you don't mind. What sort of a guy were you at school? Where did it all start?
Well, hey, I was nothing special growing up. Although when I was in my park, it's a Senior Park where I was growing up on, I think my friends called me Racing Snake because we used to play tag and stuff, and I used to be at least a wee bit fast, running about the park. But I played a wee bit of football at school, Gaelic. Well, I don't know if you could class it playing or not, but I turned up and put on a jersey. Played for Drumrah for a wee bit back then, but hey, I didn't really do much. And I went to university and went on the beer for about 4 years, and
As you do.
as you do, and didn't touch any sport for a number of years. And it was only really when I got married then in 2004, and I think the wife was looking rid of me out of the house for a while. So that's when I got into biking, because I had always an interest in cycling. When I was growing up, my brother was a good underage cyclist, and there was a number of really good young cyclists around home at that time, a number of good families, the Mulligans, the McCartys, O'Neills, and at that time the only club local, well, there's two clubs local, Street Wheelers and Fintna CC. And I always seen my brother race and always thought, God, I'd love to do that, but I never just got into it until, properly until after I got married then.
So it's about sort of 2005 that you try your hand at the cycling, and you must have been one of these boys that just naturally fell into it, because you're very successful pretty much from the get-go.
And it's hard to believe that's 20 years ago this year, because I remember in that first year, I progressed. At that stage, there was three categories in cycling: 1, 2, and 3. So I started off as a at the 3 beginner level, and I progressed through to the top number, Cat 1. And at the end of that year, I had won a big race called the Newry 3-Day, which I was lucky enough to go back this year and take part in again, albeit I didn't really make much of an impact this time. But I suppose what I learned about myself when I started the cycle, the bike racing proper, was I just got stuck in, and I was probably an aggressive style of racing, and somebody that probably not intentionally, but I was someone who could suffer. And when the bike racing, that's definitely a good attribute to have, being able to suffer. So no, hey, I was very lucky in that first year. I represented Ulster in a couple of races, and I suppose never. That was the start of it, really. And like in my second year, I went on to ride a couple of the bigger races, the tour, the 3-Day Tour of the North, 3-Day Tour Ulster, and then the 8-Day International Ross. So like I hit the ground running and like really loved it, really enjoyed. And over the years, I think the thing that really I learned about myself was I loved the training more than the racing. But yeah, that was kind of how I started off in the bikes.
Tell me this. I'm fascinated to find out how you can throw your leg over a bike, let's say for the sake of argument, in January, and then win a 3-day event a number of months later within the same calendar year. Because I'm biking for, I suppose, the last 3, this might be my 4th season, trying to have a level of consistency. I'm not doing something right, and I think it's just that I'm not bloody getting out on the bike. But what's your take on a fast track to cycle fitness? Because you just rocketed. You got on the bike and you're winning stuff straight away.
Yeah.
What was your kind of training? What did it look like?
Well, I suppose, like all sports, there's a couple of things. First of all, there's a lot of hard work goes in behind the scenes. So at that stage, I was living in Belfast, out by Newton Abbey, and I joined the club, the local club, East Antrim Cycling Club. And and again, you see that with the trade club and everything. If you join a good club with a lot of experienced people, you can learn very quickly. And like I had the training group that I trained with over the winter, the previous winter. Like I learned so much. They schooled me very well, and so you not only were you training with a good quality of cyclist, but you were learning stuff all the time, and then having a bit of crack too. And the skills that I learned as part of that winter training transferred over to the racing. And I remember back again years and years ago when I went out my bike, my dad. Wee things that I would learn with him and Johnny Mulligan, who's again was like a really experienced cyclist at the time, was racing for your signposts, your 30s and 40 speed limits, and so I think a good foundation over the winter was a big thing. Training with a really good experienced group was another big thing, and then raced hard, and the hard racing. I suppose the harder I raced, the more it brought me on, and I think that aggressive style that I had as well, paid dividends, and I suppose road racing is doesn't take any prisoners, and you have to be willing to take a risk, and in terms of attacking, and I suppose that's where I was willing to get stuck in, attack, go up the road, and I suppose that was something that I stuck with me through the road racing. Was I was always willing to have a go. People knew I was honest, and if I was going to attack, I'd be willing to bury myself,
Mm-hmm.
In the latter years, I probably hadn't just got the fitness to do myself justice. The head was cashing, writing checks that the body couldn't cash.
Mm-hmm.
So I think for anybody, getting the foundations right, getting a good foundation winter training in, and I suppose just learning to make good use of time then.
Tell me this, David, where did that grit come from? When you're in a pain cave on a bike, and anybody that cycled will know what that feels like, when your legs are screaming and your lungs are busting, eyeballs bleeding and all the rest.
Yeah.
But there's people that can do that, and there's people that don't do very well whenever they're tested to that level. Do you think there was something a wee bit different with you that enabled you to go there and to stay there? Psychologically, was it a mental thing, or was it just this is what you do, you just get on with it?
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I think in hindsight, we grew up working class family, and my dad was a coal man for 30 years, and I suppose he was a grafter, and I remember one time, and it probably sounds funny now, but I remember one time he broke his arm, broke his elbow, and he was right-handed, and at that stage, your bags of coal were 50 kg bags of coal,
Mm-hmm.
and if you didn't turn up for work, you weren't getting paid. So the next day, he had the arm in a sling, and he was back out, and I don't know, many ton of coal would have been on the lorry, working on his own, and he was learning to lift the 50 kg bag on his back with his left arm,
Mm-hmm.
right? So he had one broken arm and still carrying these 50 kg bags of coal. Um, so over the years, I suppose, that's maybe an attribute that's just within the DNA a bit, So look at
Mm-hmm.
my sister and my brother, and we're probably, we're grafters, and we had nothing, we had no silver spoon in our mouth growing up, so you had
Mm-hmm.
to work for everything, and maybe that's just ingrained in us, and when it comes then to sport, or anything really, you get stuck in, and so maybe I don't know if that I've not thought too much about it, but maybe there's something about that. But but yeah, again, that wasn't something I had. Again, there was no coach. I was never coached. There was nothing that anybody ever told me to do. It was just instinctively. I just get stuck in, and probably as we probably go through, that's been a risk of my own, and that sometimes I don't really have much of a rev limiter, and so I can push myself too hard and come a cropper a few times because of that too.
Mm-hmm. It's a good answer, Stevie. It's one that kind of resonates with myself as well. Just the idea that back then, I know you're a bit younger than me, But certainly, working class families, the attitude was, just get on with it, dry your eyes, get it done. Do you know what I
Mm.
mean? You just
Mm-hmm.
quit messing about, just do what you need to do. And it was a different world. The world's, I think, controversially perhaps, but I think the world's got a wee bit too soft.
Mm.
Where everybody's sort of wilting away, like a bit of wind there the other day, and the whole place shuts down.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
here, that's probably for another podcast for someone else. I'll just lap myself in a whole pile of hot water, so probably best to shut up. 2007, Stevie. A big change for you and your wife. You were only married a couple of years, and all of a sudden there's a wee bundle of joy has landed into the family now. This is bound to have thrown a spanner into the old rear wheel of the cycling career, surely.
Yeah. Well, well, funny. So that was our first came along, yeah, in 2007. Owen, he's 18 now. And actually, I remember distinctly. So I think, like, I'm kind of a fairly laid back character, and I remember when my wife was went into labour. We were heading in the roads again. We were out in Newton Abbey at the time. We were going in the M, whatever the road was, the M5, and I had planned to bring a couple of cycling magazines to read, right? So I forgot the magazines. So I turned the next junction, went back to get my magazines. Meanwhile, she was in labour in the flipping car, like so. So she didn't thank me for that. But the Tour of the North that year, which was a 3 day, maybe a 4 day stage race, was maybe a week or two after. And I remember I still did that race, so I had a very understanding wife, and again, it's a team effort. There's no doubt about that. But no, I continued to race that year. Probably, wasn't that sensible to do, but kept her lit. And I suppose ever since, kind of been juggling family, work, sport, and again, I know you've talked about yourself trying to just be a role model as for your kids growing up, in terms of positive things they can do.
You got a wee bit more deeper into the cycling as well around that time, Stevie. You started dabbling in a wee bit of managing, taking on people, junior teams and stuff like that. Talk me through a wee bit about that.
I well initially I think it was that first year again, back to 2005. I was lucky enough to get selected in a cycling Ulster team. At that time, it was Tommy and Marion Lamb were sort of the real key people in cycling Ulster. And after getting to know me through the cycling, Marion had invited me to see if I would be willing to be part of the cycling Ulster executive. So I did that for a few years, really enjoyed it. That then moved along, and I got involved in the Cycling Ireland national executive. Went on then to be part of the junior, the road commission. So I ended up taking a couple of teams out to Belgium. Martin
Mm-hmm.
Irvine, who's the world champion, he was only a junior at the time, but like some brilliant talent. I remember being out in Belgium. I remember driving the wrong way down the road in the team car, nearly getting wiped out. So I was involved in sort of the running, the governance of the sport for a number of years. Met a brilliant amount of people. Like there's some fantastic volunteers in sports, so learned about that, and then. I suppose later years, when I came back home and moved back to Oma, I got involved at Oma Wheelers. Was involved with that for a number of years, and I just suppose led to one thing to another. Again, back to that idea of a grafter. I suppose just somebody who's a doer and gets stuff done, and I suppose the more I did at the sport, the more I loved it, the more passionate I got about it. I ended up organising the Tour of Oma 3 day race for 10 years with Mark McAleer. Organised two national championships over the years in Oma, which done things that Oma had never had. And I remember the elite national championships that are organised in 2015. I think it was like a highlight that still I'll never forget. So that's kind of a series of races over 4 days, and like
Mm-hmm.
again, you've got your Tour de France riders, that caliber riders coming back, and we had it gone up through the main street in Oma, like it was fantastic. But I took a notion about March, so this came at the end of July, end of June, start of July, I think, and I took a notion. Flip, wouldn't it be great to be able to ride the race as well as organise the race? And I
Mm-hmm.
hadn't done much training or racing that year, I think, and I remember about March time, I went on a bike ride and I came home and I'd done about 3 hours. I thought, geez, hey, wonder is that a stupid idea? And cut a long story short, ended up organising it and riding it. And and I ended up getting an actual break that day as well with the likes of Eddie Dunbar and a brilliant cyclist, Moma Mark Potts, who finished fifth that day. But I remember like these flipping professionals and top of the line riders, and there was me stuck in this wee break on the first lap. And I remember the commissaire, who's kind of like a referee, he was in a motorbike, and he came up alongside us, and he was on the race radio. And I got to hear him because we were on one side of the road and he was on the other side of the road. And he says to the other officials, he was calling out the names of the riders in the break. And he says, Eddie Dunbar, Mark Potts, Mark Downey, and the race directors in the break as well. He says, I don't think I've ever said that before.
Brilliant.
So that's something that I just was so proud of, to be able to deliver that in Oma, and for our own club, for our own local riders like Mark Potts, and we had Angus Fife, Gary Donaldson, brilliant riders. Mark finished fifth that day, and just to be able to take part in it. So hey, it was a whistle. It was a really really busy. I suppose, how long was that? Was that 10, 15 years of being in the sport as a athlete, but also as an official, as a volunteer, as a race director. I wore a lot of hats over those years. I don't know how I done it, in fairness, looking back, because I've hardly time to bless myself these days without organising anything, not alone, all that stuff on the side. So, but yeah, it was a great time, met great people. And again, including people in the Tri Club now, now that I'm part of the Tri Club, met great friends, and it's fantastic to see just all the volunteers that goes in behind making all this stuff work.
You mentioned there, Stevie, that you've worn a few caps in different roles and avenues in cycling over all these years. I suppose I'm quite glad now, and I guess you probably are, that you wore a few helmets too, because you've had a couple of tumbles over the years as well. It has to be said, it hasn't all been sweetness and light and glory. It's not the Instagram lifestyle that we all are led to believe online, because you've had a few tumbles.
I have, like, I suppose, again, my wife would probably tell you, like, sport's bad for your health. My sort of side of things, yeah, I've been in a few A&Es over my time, and a few medical tents. And I suppose, one that people will probably remember and talk about was, we used to have nighttime mountain bike races out in Gorge and Glens. I think between the Wheelers and Caldwell cycles, we had this wee sort of series we used to have. So pitch black, and it was brilliant. Like, it was, you might have 20 or 30 people taking part in these nighttime races, full gas, like, so really enjoyed that. But one particular night, there was the race on, and anyway, up around the deer enclosure, which people probably know, I came into a wee bend, a wee bit too hot, and decided to use my head as a brake, up against a tree, and just unluckily for me, there was a broken branch in the tree that I whacked my head off, and it opened my ear like just slicing butter, and it took half my ear off.
Right.
And I always think back, the kids programs used to be, whenever somebody was hitting the head, they're like wee birds flying around them with wee stars.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I felt like, these flipping stars and birds flying around my head. And now initially I didn't really know what had happened. I was stunned, it's fair to say, and confused, and got going again. And actually, I remember I passed a cyclist after I got going again. But I happened to look down, because I had a head torch on my head, and then a torch in the front of the bike. And I happened to look down. My head was ringing, flipping there. It was like a bell going off my head. I looked down, and all I could see was the top tube in the bike was covered in blood. And I thought, Jesus, that's not good news. And I was going to go and continue to do the lap, and then I thought, no, hey, you need to be sensible. So little did I know, I was probably in the middle of passing out. So I made my way back to where the start line was, and one of the lads who was involved with the Tri Club 2, Paul Warner, he was doing sort of the timing. And I remember coming up to him, and I said, Paul, come on, there's something wrong with me here, take a look at me. And I think his reaction was, this boy's like Freddy Krueger here, covered in blood, this kind of thing hanging off the side of my head, which was my ear. And that was a journey then to Alton Galvin. I got 26 stitches in getting my ear reattached. So hi, that was a bit of a journey, and then I had another nice incident where I broke my femur. I was probably maybe later on in the latter years, broke my femur out mountain biking up in the Glens. And I was with my two lads at the time who were about 13 and coming down Keelan's Chase. And hey, it was just a random accident. I literally just fell over, couldn't get clipped out, and broke the neck of my femur. And we were about a kilometre from the car park, no phone, and me with a broken femur. And actually, initially when I fell, I didn't think. I thought I had just got a what do you call a dead leg
Yeah.
until I tried to move, and then it was like three-phase electricity going through me.
Oh, geez.
Uh, so I was some handling trying to get back to the car park. These two cubs of 13 trying to manhandle me onto a bike, and I remember what we did was I had a dropper post on my mountain bike, so somehow we managed, and it was probably just pure adrenaline I was working on.
Hmm.
They managed to get me up onto the bike, so that I could support myself. And then the two of them were sort of running down the trail, one on each side of me, keeping me tilted up. And every movement like was just like a bolt of lightning going through you.
Gee.
Um, got back to the car park eventually, and I was hyperventilating. Like the pain was really hitting me that much. I remember I was hyperventilating. I was just literally passing out stage, and they couldn't even get me off the bike then because any movement then was just too much to bear. So and that's the first time well, not the first time, but I remember ending up meeting Connor McGuire, who we've talked about, and with Copenhagen.
Hmm.
Whenever I was lying in A&E for 10 hours and then a skilling on a trolley, and he was walking up because he works in the hospital,
Hmm.
and he was walking past. He says, "Jesus, that's Stevie, is it?" So, so we had exchanged notes at that time. Um, I and then in the Ross, I managed to do the international Ross twice. The second time I did it, I was unlucky to get taken off as well, which pretty much ended my race. So I've been on the tarmac and on the floor a few times. Probably no prettier for the not that I was pretty to start off with, like, but I definitely wasn't any better afterwards.
My God, that's the old grit coming back, getting back on the horse, as it were. So your cycling, Stevie, sort of spanned from about 2005 right the way up to sort of 2018. You were really solely focused on cycling in many
Yep,
shapes and many forms under
yep.
many caps. Tell me what happened with the biking that it got parked for a while and the running was introduced into the mix.
Well, that second crash I mentioned there in the international Ross. So that was May 2017, and I got taken off in the third stage, landed on my back on the ground, and actually this is another funny story about that, and that a couple of good lads from around home, Sean Kelly from MoMA and a guy Peter Ward, they were doing the team car that day, and when I landed on the road, a guy just took me out on we were on a line out, and I got taken out, and when I hit the road, I landed in the small of my back, from what I can gather, and I was really badly wounded. It transpired anyway that I had damaged sort of soft tissue in my back, but I suppose adrenaline and stuff. Then I got back up. Took me about 10 minutes to get back up off the ground because he had been wounded and just worry about concussion and all that crack. And at that stage, like that kind of race, the race is traveling along about 28 mile an hour average, so they are shifting like,
Mm-hmm.
and the commissaire that day was hanging about, I suppose, because they were probably he's probably thinking, is he going to get in the car or whatever? But had to wait for him to bugger off. We got on the bike, the bike was broke then, so then I had to swap bikes, and once we got going again, I was on. This was in Ballybuffet, Stranraer, heading to Buncrana, sorry, Letterkenny. So it's a big, long, wide road. And once we got up and going, I was flipping stuck on the bumper of the car. So I don't know if you've ever seen that, but essentially you're riding behind the car as close as you can to get a drafting of it. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember we were doing 60 mile an hour along this main road. We were actually passing other traffic because we had built up that speed. And I was glued to these boys, the bumper. And it took us, I think, 40k, so 25 mile, it took us to catch. And we eventually caught the race. Me, the ass hanging out of me, shorts all tore off me. And eventually caught the race at Letterkenny and nearly crashed into the back of the cars then as well. But so anyway, although I made a great sort of recovery that day, that next morning I was in bad shape. I retired from the race that day, and that was in May. And that whatever back issue I had got, which I never really got properly diagnosed, but that affected me for a good 6 months after that.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just fed up with the bike. I'd sort of been there, done that, and I was just scundered with the bike in general, and I just wanted to do something different. And I had got this idea that, geez, it'd be good to get, these boys to do these marathons. I wonder if they're any good at that. And so that was 2017. I tried to do a bit of running, but my back was that bad. It was Christmas before I was able to run. And so I got this kind of, I don't know, just got this interest in doing long distance running, and particularly a marathon. I thought, that's in the bucket list. I'd like to try and do a marathon some stage. And
Mm-hmm.
so that was the main thing that got me lit about the running. But interestingly, as an identity, for the first couple of years when I was running, I was always classed myself as a cyclist who was trying a bit of running as opposed to a runner.
Right. Okay.
And I was turning up to these running races and probably still wearing my cycling jersey, because I
Yeah.
still thought I was a cyclist, And I suppose, as we come on to the same with the triathlon, when I started triathlon, I was a runner doing a bit of triathlon rather than a triathlete.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, that was the start of the running journey. And again, I didn't do it the easy way. I made a lot of mistakes. I ended up going in the ringer for it. I remember I eventually tried my first marathon in end of 2018. Again, typically as a cyclist, I thought I could just do running the way I could do cycling and hammer myself, but that didn't work. Struggled with a lot of injuries. And that first marathon to Dublin 2018, famously as well. Again, my training was not good. I had been injured, so I lost a lot of training. I thought I would didn't practice any nutrition, hadn't a clue about nutrition for running. And I just thought, hey, I'll just rock up and do what I used to do on the bike racing in terms of nutrition.
Mm-hmm.
And despite losing about 6 weeks of running as well with injuries, I thought, hey, I was going for sub 3 hours with the other boys in Knockmany. And anyway, I was going all right till about 20 mile, and then the wheels came off the wagon in spectacular style. I went from hero to zero in the space of 1 mile till again running 6:52 pace at 20 mile till standing up against a wall like a jelly baby,
Uh-huh.
completely out of it. And I first time actually I had a couple of times on the bike where I've had really bad knock and sort of been in bad shape, but this topped it all. Like I remember standing up against this wall. I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. All I could do was blink. I had completely just ran myself into a hole, and actually I remember distinctly again during that mile. First of all, I had got diarrhea, and I had my whole guts and stuff went out the window, and I found that the more I found myself slowing down, the harder I tried to push through it.
Mm-hmm.
And in hindsight, it was like, you ever see them tractors that do the racing, like the tractor racing where there's like a plough in the front, and the faster it gets, it digs further into the ground.
Yeah. Yeah.
What do we call that, American tractor racing? Well, that's probably, the harder I was pushing, the more my brain was just putting the handbrake on and
All right.
saying, right, boy, we're going to teach you a lesson here. And
Uh-huh.
I got a big lesson taught me that day, how the brain can just hit the flick a switch and just switch you off. And hey, I ended up, I don't know how long I was standing against that wall, but I remember a man, he came over and manhandled me down the road a bit, because I couldn't even put one foot in front of the other. And then there was a bunch of supporters from Knockmany, took me on down the road, got me in an ambulance, spent about an hour and a half in the ambulance. They were pumping gels and coffee into me, trying to revive me. Um, and I ended up, eventually, I got it finished, to get back into the ambulance, got across the line in about 4.5 hours.
Mm-hmm.
So I got a lesson learned that day. That was my first marathon. And I so I've done quite a few marathons since that. and again learned a few other lessons. My second marathon was in Belfast the following year. Again, plagued with injuries beforehand. Again, just being sort of, too aggressive in training. That day I did get it finished. That was the first time the new course in Belfast, and it was a mile longer than it should have been.
Right.
And I had got to that sort of 25-mile mark, and my body started shutting down again. Also, because of my lack of training, I had started to cramp in both calves about halfway. So I had ran the second half of the marathon managing these cramps in both calves. And anyway, got to the line about 3 hours and 1 minute. And all I remember is this woman, first aider, saying, "Here, son, you're not looking good." And she put me into a wheelchair. And again, my body hit the switch, the kill switch, and I ended up in the medical tent for 2 hours that day. I think I set a new record in the medical tent.
PB in a
Just
freaking
completely
medical.
comatose. PB in the medical tent. I was comatose for the first hour. I was completely out of it. And the second hour, every inch of my body started cramping. And I swear to God, hey, it was again a bit like that three-phase electricity going through me. So you know that saying, "Do it as I say, not as I do."
Mm-hmm.
So I can definitely tell people how not to do it.
Yeah. Whenever you're speaking earlier on about getting, that you're good at suffering, you really are, like, you're pushing yourself to a point there, literally, where your brain's saying, "Here, hold on a minute, just fucking cool the jets. You're going to burn up here." Um,
Uh,
so
yeah, yeah,
you took yourself to breaking point, collapsing point, total exhaustion,
yeah,
body shutdown zone. Surely, for
yeah.
Christ's sake, you learned your lesson after that, did you? Maybe you didn't.
Well, I did, and well, actually, I knew there was something fundamental. Well, yes, one big problem I have was a bit of a no rev limiter, and I needed to calm the ham and probably work my pacing out, and so that was one big thing. Nutrition, though, and I think in hindsight, when I looked more into it, the body shutting down for me was a lot about the sodium in my body, and
Mm-hmm.
the more I learned about it, I was a very heavy sweater, and I didn't realize that, so I wasn't taking on fluids, I wasn't taking on electrolytes, and again, I researched this, spoke to people, what's wrong with me here, something majorly wrong, but it was the sodium levels that was changing dramatically in my blood, and again, the brain was putting you into self protect mode,
Mm-hmm.
so I learned more about that, which I then again, just getting the basics right. I started then practicing that in my training. How do I get my hydration right? How do I fuel properly? And so that, and going back to the basics, and then consistency in training then was the things that I changed. And I did my fourth marathon. It took me to actually finally crack it. And do what I felt I could do. Because
Mm-hmm.
I suppose what was always eating away at me, and I suppose that's just the kind of individual I am. It's not. And actually, the thing I learned about running that was very different to cycling. Cycling is especially road racing, is a very competitive sport, and you're competing against other people. Whereas the thing I learned about running was, the only person you're really competing against is yourself,
That's right.
and what you put in is what you got out. And I've loved that element of running, and as well with the running, it's so inclusive. You have everybody from fast to slow, from all age groups. It's all about participation, and I've loved that about the running. But I knew within myself I had more in the tank.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, I was emptying the tank at the same time, but I knew there was just potential, more in me that I wanted to get out, and eventually, so in 2021, I eventually emptied the truck properly that day, and I got a 2:36 marathon in London that day,
Mm-hmm.
um, and I suppose, what I had got right that day was starting to learn from my mistakes, getting the pacing right, getting the nutrition right, getting the hydration right, getting the training right. Injury free was a big thing because all the previous times I was always injured. So that was the first time I had a really good training block with no injuries, good consistency. And in fairness now, I did let it at it that day too. Like I was just looking back when we're just preparing for this. I was looking back, like, and I couldn't believe it. Like some of the splits I had that day, like I couldn't run flipping 5K. Like my first 5K that day in London was like 17:43. I did my first half marathon and 1:16. Like I couldn't even. There's no way I'd be, anywhere close to that, even just for doing 5K these days. So, um, but I had the confidence in the training and I just went for it,
Mm-hmm.
and I suppose that was again the risk of ending up in an ambulance again. But I suppose that sometimes you have to take a risk, and it paid off that day, and did something I never thought I could do. So it all sort of came together in London.
It was some turnaround, Stevie, and not for the first time I've been speaking to you, and understanding benefits of cross training, having all the cycling under your belt and already in
Mm.
you give you a real good solid foundation to take on another sport, and running, albeit a very very different sport and a very more impactful sport. Um, it stood you in good stead. The cycling did, however, come back and bite you on the ass. You've already alluded to the femur break, very, very nasty break. That was in that year too, wasn't it? That was in 2021. So when you had
Yeah.
finally got everything all nicely teed up, your 5K time was 17 and a half, a 1:16 half marathon, the 2:36 marathon, and then the Glens comes back and dishes you out with another nasty injury. That forced you to go back in time. You threw your leg over a stationary bike again for the first time in a couple of years. What was going through your head at that point?
Well, hey, that the Glens, like when I was in the Glens from I was about 15, with a boy called Mad Mac, Paul McManaman from Omagh, like so. I had spent years and years in the Glens, got away very very well in terms of crashes and stuff. But this particular accident was only like 2 weeks after that London Marathon, so I was probably very lean. Just the kids wanted to get out and do a bit of biking, and so I had done actually there's an enduro event, mountain bike downhill event, the week before, which I did and had a good crack. And then this particular day we're out just having a bit of fun, just tiddling along, nothing fancy, and say tipped over and broke a femur. And hey, that was a wild shock to the system. From being somebody who trained every day for years, and just was part of my lifestyle, to then going from again from hero to zero, going from being doing this fantastic performance in London to then ending up in a stretcher in A&E for 10 hours, and getting I got a dynamic hip screw fitted to my hip, so fairly significant surgery, and that them first few weeks after that, I was probably in shock to some extent. Again, what I do next, and I suppose I was on a bit of panic mode, saying I need to get back to myself, and my first focus was being able to get back on the bike. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember, within weeks anyway, like my knee was up like a football, because suppose of all the blood having drained in my leg to my knee, my leg was my knee was up like a football. So it took weeks and weeks to get that inflammation down to a level that I was in the gym in the house training on the turbo trainer, trying to get my leg over the bike. And my first goal was being able to turn the pedals of the bike, right? And I managed to do that after about, I don't know, 6 or 7 weeks. And the wife looking at me thinking this guy's definitely lost the plot. Well, I suppose she probably knew I lost the plot a long time before that, right enough. But
She just
um,
hadn't said it out loud till that point.
so that was a massive blow, like, and just suppose definitely in a set of shock and anxiety, and my just goal for everything I could think about was I need to get back to where I was, and I suppose a mantra. I know I had said to you, like, I probably dealing with setbacks and being resilient is something I probably learned through a lot of these things. And there was a couple of wee mantras and wee mottos that I just learned, and just kept telling myself. And one thing one thing I kept telling myself was, don't focus on the things you can't do, focus on the things you can do. So
Yeah.
I thought, right, if I can't run, if I can't bike, right, I'll go learn about nutrition. I'm lying in my bed here for X weeks. I'll learn about nutrition because that was something that I still hadn't got nailed. So that was a sort of a mantra that I developed lying in my bed, and I suppose just trying to get back to myself, but doing it step by step. And well, sorry, steps that I couldn't take any steps, but focusing on the things you can do or you can control rather than the things you can't was, suppose, just something I carried through that year. And it took me. I remember the following Christmas. So that was no start of November 2023. No, 2021. Start of November 2021, and the following Christmas. So that was Christmas then. So that was a year and 13 months later. My big goal was on Christmas Day being able to go out for a 5K run with my two cubs.
Mm-hmm.
And that particular that was something I was working towards all year, trying to just get back to being able to go out and run for like 20 minutes or whatever it was. 30, no, it was a lot more than 30 minutes. Run to the top of Knockmany, and but that was something that kept me motivated that year. And came Christmas Day that year. Now my two lads had no interest in going out for a run on Christmas Day, but
I can imagine.
I said, boys, for my Christmas present, all I want you to do with me is run to the top of Knockmany with me, and hey, that was something that I'll never forget. Being able to do that with them after them being with me for the crash that time and breaking the femur and seeing me and flipping, screaming as hard as I could with the pain, till then, 13 months later, being able to go out. And so that was the start of a bit of a journey, and I learned a lot about myself that year, about just appreciating the basics in life,
Mm-hmm.
because when you're an athlete and you're busy, all these things pass you by, and you think you're flipping Superman,
Mm-hmm.
and you don't take time to think about the basics and how lucky we all are to have our health, and actually, there's a thing I was thinking about as well. There was a when I was fit and running, I used to train in Park and the forest, it was kind of
Aye.
peatlands park, and all the time, because I work in Belfast, so I'd be on the side of the motorway, and I'd be in there early in the mornings, 6 o'clock, say 6:30, and there was this elderly lady that I used to meet out walking her dog, and this lady may have been in her 70s, and at the time I never thought much of it, but I used to meet her every time I was out running, and when I was then lying in my flipping bed, and whenever I got back to work, right, I'd be driving up the motorway, and I used to see her car sitting outside Peatlands Park, and it was rain, hail, snow, blizzard, whatever the conditions, dark, whatever. She was there with her dog walking, right, and I started to notice this increasingly, right, and I just couldn't, because I'd never noticed it before, past the, things you'd never think of, but I just couldn't believe there was this person who was just showing up every day. They weren't going there to run a marathon. They weren't going there to win any medals. They were just showing up every day, and
Mm-hmm.
just to go out and walk their dog. And this became, it might sound stupid, but she became a massive inspiration to me. And
Mm-hmm.
I thought, someday I want to get back out and be able to go out and run in that park again. And actually, I do. I want to go back and meet this lady and say thank you, because, as stupid as it might sound, you've been a massive inspiration to me, because you've been showing up every day, irrespective of the weather, and taking your dog for a walk. And it's funny how things just completely, your perspective in life changes. And so
Mm-hmm.
for me, just getting back to be able to even walk and doing a wee simple run again, which I'd never even thought of before, but that meant so much to me now, just being able to go back and do them simple things in life.
Mm-hmm.
And when I did get back to running, I did go back to the park, and I did go and meet her. I was conscious I might think this guy's a stalker, fucking watching me.
Yeah. Some boy running
but
out from
I
behind the
said,
trees.
I says to her, you don't even know who I am, but I just want to say thanks to you, because you've been somebody who have been an inspiration to me for over the last year or 18 months. And again, that whole journey, learned so much about myself and about how to deal with setbacks, and just again, focus on the things that you can control rather than the things you can't. And especially in sport, like people suffer, with injuries a lot of the time, and it can affect your well-being and your mental health side of things as well. So just going back to basics and really appreciating every day, just having the health and ability to go out and do these things, irrespective of races or times or medals or whatever.
Thank you, Stevie. That's class stuff, and you're just right. It is just about the basics. And it was a moment there. I had it pictured in my head whenever you were out running on Christmas Day with the two lads, and it was great as well. And I suppose it was very important for them to get a closure to that injury as well, and see their dad back on track. Recovered, fighting fit, and that just tied up that whole kind of, maybe you might call it a trauma for them lads, but dad's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Your resilience would be
Yeah.
tested again, Stevie, in 2023, whenever your son Owen got some bad news.
Mm-hmm. Again, that was something that I know when we spoke it beforehand. I thought, it'd be a good sort of opportunity to talk about that, because just for raising awareness around that. So Owen, my lad at the time, was 15. He was fit as a fiddle. Like I remember him going out and doing a 5K with another young lad that's from Esker here. He didn't do any running training, but he ran 17:30, like just like that. He played football, but I was thinking, you jammy wee shite.
Yeah.
Most of us train for life and can never run that, and then he just goes out and runs it. So he was fit as a fiddle, and at around that time he had taken an interest in bike racing, and so this would have been about January. And that particular year he was 15 at the time, so that's about 3 years ago, and we were doing a Swift race together. And we had the two bikes set up beside each other in the garage, and we had just finished the race, probably a 30-40 minute race. And I got off the bike and he was cooling down still, and I happened to look at the screen, and I seen his heart rate was at 250 on the screen, right? And I says to him, "Owen, check your heart rate strap there, because there definitely must be wrong. It says your heart rate's 250." And he says, and he wasn't out of breath. He was talking normally. He says, "Aye, but Daddy, I can feel quite a beating in my chest." And I put my hand on his chest, and the fucking thing was like nearly, it was like a drum beating. This thing was beating in his chest. I thought, holy fuck. So I got him off the bike, and eventually got him to lie down on the ground. And for 6 minutes, his heart rate was going at about 250, 260, just literally sitting on the ground. And I was starting to panic at this stage. Anyway, that sort of started a bit of a journey, and we eventually got him diagnosed. And he had this condition called Wolff Parkinson White syndrome. And it's this condition in the heart where you essentially have no rev limiter. We all have kind of rev limiters in our hearts, between the the top two chambers and the bottom two chambers. And he essentially had a bypass. This condition, you have a bypass, and it allows this electrical current to go through your heart, and was bypassing this rev limiter. So his heart was going into full red lining, and then had no ability to calm down.
Right.
And what it can end up is your heart just stopping. So apparently this is more common than we think, and I know of a lot of other people now who have had it, and adults. It can be quite prominent in adults too. And he ended up having to go through heart surgery. He had to go through heart surgery twice, because the first time it didn't work. And the surgery involves them going up through your artery in your leg up into your heart, and they do what's called ablation, where they're trying to burn this piece of skin, or essentially it's like a wire. They're trying to burn it off the heart, and it's unbelievable what they can do. Like, it's incredible. But the first surgery went through, they were able to get a bit of it removed, but it didn't work properly. And then we had to wait a year later to go through another surgery. And the second time they had to go through one artery in the leg, couldn't get it. Went through the second artery in the other leg, couldn't get it. And then they ended up going through the jugular in the neck. Which you sort of think people, that saying, go for the jugular. Well, they did go for the jugular that day. And thank God, these specialists are so incredible. Like, they were able to get it resolved. So that was Wolff Parkinson White syndrome. But I suppose again it goes back to that thing. You can't take your health for granted, and that was something who was a young guy, absolutely super fit, and then bang went from hero to zero, and we ended up going through heart surgery twice, and you just it rocks your whole foundations, and you sort of just be thinking, God, what did we ever worry about other things like money and material possessions? Because all that doesn't matter a bollocks, like if
That's
you don't
right.
have your health and your family like that. So so I just thought I would mention it because it's an experience we had, and I suppose it's a kind of thing just to encourage people that if they do have anything with the old ticker that's not right, to go and get it checked out. And because there's lots of different things that can go wrong, but getting the old MOT for the body really really important. So, but thank God, he the second surgery worked. He's back at football now. He's loving life. He's working, and he's never looked back since. So thankfully, we're going the right direction.
I thank God everything worked out okay for him. You went through a surgery yourself as well in 2023 towards the end of the year, to get that hip
Yep.
screw removed. I suppose that knocked on then into 2024. You're probably out of action for a while, suffering again.
I knew that the leg wasn't right. Again, I was determined. Like in my head, when I was like again laying in bed after that surgery, because when I done London, although I'd done a fantastic time, I had something telling me I still got more in me.
Mm-hmm.
That I could get back, and if I hadn't have been had that injury, I was thinking I could do better than that again. And so this was in the back of my mind. I need to get back to running, and I know that year when it did. So say 2 years later, when I was getting back to running, and I was still in a lot of pain. There was still like if you had seen me running, I was like a flipping, somebody running with a wooden leg. I was
Mm-hmm.
I was all over the place. I was not a pretty sight running. So I was in a lot of pain, and I had a championship time from London, which I didn't want to waste. So if you get under 240, you can get automatic entry into another world marathon. So I didn't want to waste it, and I had actually when I was lying in bed after my surgery, I had applied for Berlin
Mm-hmm.
marathon, but that subsequent year, like I couldn't even run 5K, not alone a marathon. So I deferred to 2023. And so I had my head right. I'm going to go back and run Berlin, but like I was in still pain. I knew I was in bad shape, and I went back and got a MRI scan done, and it showed that I was constantly inflammation around my hip where the steel was, and the steel just wasn't agreeing with me. But anyway, I had said to the consultant, I said, "What do I need to do?" And he says, "You can get the steel taken back out again." And I says, "Great." I says, "Any chance I can still run a marathon in the meantime?" And they says, "Well, if you can manage the pain, you're not going to do yourself any harm, but it's just going to be very painful." So I thought, right, if I can delay the surgery to after Berlin, I'll try and run Berlin and then get the surgery after that. And so that was the plan. And hey, it was again, I put myself through the ringer trying to train. Like it wasn't pretty. I remember one day, I knew I needed to get some mileage done, but I was really bad pain. And I remember one particular day I had an 18-mile to run, and I started off from Esker Chapel, and in the first 100 meters, I was in flipping. I couldn't. I thought, right, I can't even run 100 meters here. How am I going to do this? And I was just about to pull the pin, and I thought, right, no, just keep going for another 5 minutes to see how you go. I ended up running the full 18 mile. And again, it wasn't pretty, but I got myself to Berlin start line. I remember going to on the train that morning. Like my sister was a great supporter of mine, so she had come over to support me. I was getting on the train. I was still kind of hobbling on the way to the run, but managed to get it done and get around it in a great time as well. Had a great experience in Berlin. But that was in September, and then I went back for surgery that November, and got cut open again. They got the screws taken out. I remember saying to the surgeon, any chance I could keep that stuff as a bit of a keepsake. But the buggers wouldn't allow me to keep the steel anyway, and so that was another back to square one, back to rehab, back to another 3-4 months of rebuilding. But because I'd done it before, I kind of knew what I was facing. because when to take it out, they had to cut through the whole muscle belly and the quad. So it was fairly, again, extensive surgery again, but that was end of 2023, and got back going again after about 3 or 4 months, and I got back and was able to run Dublin Marathon again in the autumn of 2024. So, and it was just every day, even just being able to go out and run, was a privilege. Like, because I learned what it was like not to be able to run, not to be able to go out and do anything on the bike. So I know since then, every day I'm able to train or do anything, it's a bonus, and I really do appreciate just my health and being able to do all that. So, um, and uh, and actually, a motto and a mantra I've sort of kept since then is, is uh, it's about, I can't remember the actual words, but less is more. That's what it is. Is you don't always have to bust yourself, and if you're doing reps or if you're doing things, I tell myself now regularly, not all the time, but regularly say, well, cut it short or do one rep less, because you don't need to always bust yourself, and push your body to the max. And so thankfully, after that surgery, I suppose that's where the triathlon journey started,
Mm-hmm.
because in that 3 or 4 months when I was going through rehab, I had thought myself, I always had in the back of my mind, I'd love to try triathlon, but I couldn't swim. And I thought, well, if I don't try it now, I'm never going to try. So I got into the swimming pool probably January, which would have been January 2024. And I remember Marty McLaughlin was a pool attendant that day, and me going in, like, and I was like somebody probably drowning trying to swim, arms everywhere, uh, and going nowhere. So that's where the sort of swimming started, and it wasn't a pretty sight. I couldn't even swim a length. I think I could just about swim a length, and like I'd have been completely busted after one length, just trying to swim from one end of the pool to the other. So that's probably where it led me into the triathlon then after that.
Triathlon sort of started for you in 2024. And you did a few sort of small races. You did your Hazelwood Olympic. That was your second ever event. You did Dublin Marathon, and then you're straight back into 2025. 2025 has been a big year for you, Stevie, just in terms of where you've come from, and particularly inspired by, again, how fast you were getting onto a bike to winning, and how fast you've come into triathlon to complete an Ironman. We're talking about roughly a calendar year, and you've done Copenhagen. The one thing that I want to ask you, just now that we've got to this point, is whenever you were chatting to me about your experience at Copenhagen, you were quite hard on yourself. You were talking
Mm.
about being a wee bit disappointed about certain aspects of your performance on the day. And I had sort of said at the time that maybe it was just a bit too soon, that maybe you were just maybe over
Yeah.
analyzing things and it was maybe too soon. Did those thoughts still, are they still the same? Or have you reflected a wee bit more on it now? Are you a wee bit more content looking back?
Yeah, no, totally. Hey, and you had wise advice. Yeah, I'm still disappointed, about the performance that day. But over them subsequent weeks, when I actually stopped and looked back and realized sort of the journey I made over the previous 2 years, I went from not being able to swim a length to then being able to do an Ironman swim. Like, I never even had any intention of doing an Ironman. Like, that was the furthest thing from my, like, even when I started triathlon, that was never something that floated my boat at all. But, thinking back to 2025, like being able to do two half distance triathlons,
Mm-hmm.
because I was thinking so much in Copenhagen, like I never even really thought too much about them, but to do a marathon in 2025 Belfast, and then to do that, I I'm super proud of what I've done, and and the journey I've been on. Like, lots of other people have done that as well. It's not nothing special about me, but I'm very proud of what I've done, and I suppose I've learned so much about the sport. I've learned so much again about just my own self, and I have learned a lot about how hard swimming is too. Like I remember you mentioned Hazelwood. Like that was my second triathlon. I done Try the Lock. Somehow that day in the sprint event, I ended up, I think it was 10th or 11th somehow. Again, I was into the swim and I was flipping. I was like a wash machine. Just to remember that day. And then in Hazelwood, that was my second triathlon Olympic distance, and it was a terrible day that day,
Mm-hmm.
and really stormy, really torrential rain, and I went into complete panic mode in the water. Thankfully got the swim finished, but I remember I had a really bad experience in the swim. And hey, in 2025, whilst my swimming's improved, like I would still classify myself as a beginner in my own head. And I had a couple of really bad experiences in open water, just Loch McCrory just in itself, and it just shows you, like, you can't take it for granted. Um, and this was actually not that long before the Ironman. I had twice in Loch McCrory where I went out a couple of 100 meters, and for whatever reason, I had taken on water and stuff. Desi McAleer had to come out and flip and save me on the paddleboard because I was in complete distress, couldn't breathe, and um, I had a couple of bad swim experiences in 2025. So hey, come back to your point, to be able to complete the Ironman after all that, and getting back, and suppose coming back from the surgery and stuff. I'm super proud, um, and I suppose it's there's a bit of a unfinished business there as well, in terms of all the things I know I need to learn and improve on, and I suppose potential what lies ahead as well. So, and it's been great to be doing part of Oma Trail Club. Like as I've loved the whole um atmosphere in the club. Like, I don't really get to train as much because just with time and family commitments and everything, I do a lot of training on my own. But it's great to have been part of that community. I think is the best way to describe it. And actually,
Mm-hmm.
triathlon as a general thing is a brilliant community. But like the running, like you've all
Yep.
abilities, you've all so many people are in it for the experience, as it not just going in for the competition. It's just about the experience in the community, which is brilliant. Like, so I've loved learning about that. Loved being part of the community. I've loved sort of the learning. Like somebody, I'm an individual who I love being challenged. I love learning, and there's plenty to learn in the triathlon side of things. And with Copenhagen again, such a flippin' steep learning curve. Like I would, if I'd never signed up for that, I would never have pushed myself to learn as much as I've done. Like, and again, it was only that the club was putting the team, the sort of the idea. Damien obviously came up with the idea of going to Copenhagen and encourage people, and of course I was a sucker and got sucked in.
Mm-hmm.
And best thing ever done because I've loved it. Like, and such a steep learning curve, and just the whole experience. I think when I spoke to you about Copenhagen, like I was probably still, it was such a lot to digest, because
Yeah.
the whole logistics, the whole traveling, the whole journey, the whole everything about it. Like there's a lot to digest, and it does take a few weeks, as you said to me at the time. It takes a few weeks to sort of absorb all that and get your
Mm-hmm.
head around it. But an absolutely fantastic experience. Like I'm so glad I did it.
Stevie, it's October now, 2025, and I don't know about you, but I've got a wee bit of an itch going on in my head thinking about what I might look at for next year. And Ironman Barcelona is actually on tomorrow, and I'm thinking it could be one for me maybe at some point in the future. Um, any thoughts about 2026 and what you might be looking forward to next year?
Yeah, so initially after Copenhagen, I had said to myself, hey, calm the ham next year and just keep it simple. I wasn't planning to go abroad anywhere. Just get back to basics in terms of my running, cycling, do a couple of local events. And that was all good until one of the club members put in their group about what about doing this Alpe d'Huez event in August. And like a sucker again, within an hour, I had signed myself up to this long distance event in Alpe d'Huez in August. Um, when I looked at it, it's kind of up my street. I'd always wanted to go to France to see kind of the roads the Tour de France were in. Like on Swift, you've got the Alpe d'Huez or the Alpe de Swift. You know, the 21 corners is quite famous. So anyway, got myself signed up for that. So that's going to be the main focus for the year. And as you know, like the whole triathlon thing is quite expensive. But anyway, signed up for that for August, and then I'll be aiming to do first half of the year. Well, actually, over the winter, I'll be planning to do a bit of cyclocross for a bit of cross training. Get back into the gym for a bit of cross training. Get back to basics with running and cycling over the winter, and then get built up towards Omaha and whenever that is, April, Belfast Marathon in May, whenever that is. Do a couple of them other events that I did this year just to sort of test myself, like the Shape Haven and Try Tyrone, and build up then towards Alpe d'Huez in August.
Brilliant stuff. Two mighty events there, Try Tyrone and Sheephaven. Two very, very different 70.3s, but equally challenging. Stevie, I've no doubt you'll smash the Alpe d'Huez, and with your, the pain threshold will be tested on a couple of them climbs, because I, like you, was a wee bit intrigued whenever the post went into the WhatsApp group and had a wee look at it. It didn't take me that while long to absolutely say not a chance. I went and googled the elevation on the cycle, and I just thought no chance. I did Ironman Ireland, which is quite hilly. I did Ironman Lanzarote, which is bloody very hilly. So I think if I go for the trilogy, I'll go for something a wee bit less challenging on the bike.
Very good.
But here, Stevie, hopefully you'll remain injury free over the winter. You'll keep all bones, intact. Yes. All flesh attached, and you'll have a successful training block. And I look forward to following your journey as it continues in 2026.
Yeah, brilliant, Mickey. And again, so probably just take the opportunity to say thanks to everybody in the Wood Trail Club for being so welcoming. And it's been great to meet people. And again, I know when I started out in the swimming pool, lane 5, like again, there's no airs or graces. Like everybody just gets on, and it's been brilliant to be part of it. I've really enjoyed being part of the club and the community. So thanks to everybody. And yeah, look forward to taking part and not ending up in any ambulances or medical tents too much.
That's a solid plan. Stay away from the ambulances. Anytime you see a red cross or a green cross or anything with a cross on it, bless yourself, hold on tight and hope for the best.
Good stuff.
All right, Stevie, thank you.
No bother. Thanks very much. Good luck.